Yes, so today we're going to talk about authentication. If anyone looked through the slides already, you may have noticed that in the plan for today, it mentions kind of talking through cookies and sessions a little bit. Tomorrow you have a cookies and sessions lesson where we'll go into more detail. Today, the reason why we're going to talk a little bit about it is because in order to log in a user, we're going to utilize sessions for that. To be able to remember a user. And so I want to do like a brief overview at some point today of the lesson that you're going to get tomorrow, just so we can feel comfortable with what we're going to be developing today. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can talk through just the plan for today, and then we'll get started. Okay, we can see slides. Cool, thank you. All right, and let me arrange everything. Cool. All right, so structure of today's class. I want to do a warm up with y'all just on your own, talk through a few questions. I want to spend kind of like a big chunk of this class diagramming out what is actually happening when we're authenticating a user. I think that we could jump into the code right away and just go ahead, bundle with a new gem and encrypt passwords and create users and all of that. But I think that understanding what bcrypt is actually doing and why we need something to hash our passwords is super important. So I want to spend some time this morning just diagramming that out, taking any questions from y'all. And then I'm going to do this a little different than how I did it last mod, just off of some feedback that I had gotten that it was just a lot of code along. And some of y'all might like code alongs. But I set this lesson up so that it can be taken outside of the classroom. So what I'm going to do after we diagram out authentication with bcrypt, I'm going to kind of set you all off on your own. I'm going to give you the option to do this on your own, or you can stay in the class and you can be partnered up and do it with somebody. That's fine with me. I can stay on here and you all can have that option to work with somebody for it. But I know some people like doing it alone, and that's totally fine. Some people like doing it with other people. That's great too. And I want you to run through with the tutorial, the registration, just the registration of a user. And I think having that background of the diagram that we'll have already gone through will help make more sense of that. Once y'all are done with that, we'll go ahead and we'll come back and I want to review the registration, the code that you implemented for registering a user. I'm going to review it all, take questions, and then I want to talk through and kind of code along with just the logging in portion. So it'll be a lot of time diagramming, a lot of time on your own. I'm kind of seeing this class broken up into 3 separate hours of 1 hour diagram warm up, the second hour on your own or with a partner, and then the third hour going over logging in using sessions. So that's kind of what I see as this class. This last part for refactoring in groups, we may or may not get to this workshop, but I would encourage you that if we don't get to the workshop today with this refactoring from non-RESTful routes that we use into this new sessions controller, which we'll talk about later. If we don't get to this workshop today, I would highly encourage that you all come back to it and take a look at refactoring it. And I'll also, at the end of this class, push up a refactored version of the code that we'll do in class. So y'all will have a copy of this if we don't get to the workshop anyway. All right, so to start, like I said, we're gonna start with a warm up, which is on this learning goals page. And we'll just kind of add to this so that y'all can come back and just see what we type out as we go through this. I want to focus on these first 2 questions just for the warm up. So what is authentication? And as a user, when you register or log into an application, what do you expect to happen? So with that second question, what I'm asking is, you all have been using multiple applications. And I mean, just in your personal life. So when you log in or when you register with a new application, what do you expect your user experience to be like as soon as you register? Or what do you expect your user experience to be like as soon as you log in? Just brainstorming that portion. What do you expect to happen when you register? What do you expect to happen when you log in? Let's go ahead and do, I meant to install a new timer I ran out of. Let's just say, let's go ahead and give you until, let's say 10, 9, 10 to go ahead and think through this on your own, and then we'll come back and we'll talk through it together. If you want to turn your cameras off, feel free to. Okay, I'm going to take volunteers for this. So just raise your hand if you would like to answer. What is authentication? Caleb.
Hey, I think authentication is verifying and ensuring we are who we say we are.
Awesome. Love it. Verifying and ensuring we are who we say we are. Yeah, I like this. I think of authentication as this question of just like, who are you? And when we talk a little bit more tomorrow about authorization, we'll talk about what do you have access to. So those are kind of like the differences between those two. Authentication, who are you? Authorization, what do you have access to? Taya?
This just occurred to me, so it might come out weird. Would authentication also be, do we know you? Like,
yeah,
you can say whoever you are, but if you're not in our system, it doesn't matter, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we could say that as well. Just saying, like, I think there's like two parts of this authentication, especially in today, what we're going to be talking about with registering. It's like, okay, give us credentials so that we know you, and we'll take those credentials and we'll store you. We'll make sure that we remember you in some way by keeping you in our database. And then when we come back to log in, we're checking against what we have stored to say, okay, are you who you said you were? Great, thanks. Thanks for saying that in another way too. I think that's helpful. What else? Any other thoughts, just like general authentication? I think this is good what we have. Didn't know if we have anything else, that's fine. Okay, how about the second part? So as a user, when you register or log into an application, what do you expect to happen? Or what do you expect your user experience to be like? Alex?
I expect to have access to everything that I'm allowed to, and for it to have my information saved, depending on what it is.
I'll have access to whatever I'm allowed to have access to.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Absolutely. And then I think it's also going to store settings, if that's an option, like store my information, like my user information.
Cool. Great. Love it. So it helps us identify the user. And as a user experience, when I log in, I'll be able to see whatever I had done before, depending on what that application is. Lawrence?
I guess also that you continue to have access until you exit that browser tab.
Yes. Okay. Continue to have access until you exit the browser tab. I think I'm also going to add here just browser, or just take away the tab portion. When we think about session, think about like your experience when you log in. Most applications that you go to when you log in, even if you close out the tab and then reopen a new one and go to that same site, you're still remembered. You don't usually have to log in again. And so that's where we're going to talk more today about sessions. And sessions is an encrypted hash that we store on a cookie. And really what that allows us to do is it allows us to stay logged in so that we can remember who had access to this application on that specific browser. And those session cookies go away as soon as you close not just the tab, but the whole browser. Awesome. Joe?
And I'd also guess I would just say one thing I would expect as a user would be like security functions. So like the data that's specific to me on my account is secure if I'm logged out or if I leave it logged in, you know.
Okay, cool. What would you expect to be secure?
Any, I mean, depends on what kind of, account we're talking about, but like, yeah, any personal information, date of birth, whatever is kind of being used to verify identity, I would hope, or just anything, any data stored on the account. That might be idealistic. Totally. That's what I would hope.
Yeah, I like that. So the only way that data can be accessed, let's say, personal data should be accessed is when that user is logged in. And so that should be the security around that. Would you agree with how I wrote that? Cool. Taya?
I would expect some type of confirmation that it worked. So either being taken to a profile page, or different apps do it differently. If I log in from a show page for an item, it usually stays on that show page, but now I'm like logged in the corner, or I have the ability to favorite. Alternatively, notification that it didn't work, the opportunity to try again, the prompt to register if that email or username is not in the system.
Cool. Yeah, I like it. Let's see, we have Joe P.
Yeah, I don't know if this is really something to add to this, but it was more of a question. What I've noticed from when you register to most applications, it doesn't actually like log you in. Sometimes it takes you to a login page. Is there a reason behind the scenes why, like, I just gave the information, why do you have to redirect me to like put it in again?
Yeah, I think that's like a user experience thing, because it would be let me think about that, because right away my first answer is I don't think it's necessary. And if anyone else can think of a reason why it would be useful to redirect to a login page once someone creates an account, feel free to raise your hand.
If you had some type of complicated login, some apps want you to do it many times, so they'll have like short session timeouts. They might just want you to practice your crap.
Yeah, I can't necessarily think of a reason. Zach, what do you think?
It might have to do with just making sure you still are who you say you are, because just because you created the account doesn't necessarily mean you are able to log in right away. Because, okay, so if you had like access just right when you registered, then I guess I'm not sure how I'm putting this into words, but registering and login are two separate things, so it kind of makes sense in my head.
Sometimes you have to verify your account with your email before you can go to a login page.
That's what I was kind of thinking too. Was that Taya? I think. So yeah, Zach and Taya too. You're good. I think, yeah, if it were the case where it was like, okay, you create an account, let's just like verify that this email, that like if that application wanted to ensure that that was your email, then they might wait for an email confirmation to be clicked. So I think that could be one reason. If that's not necessary, and there are other ways of like verifying that an email address is actually a valid email address, but if you wanted to verify that it was that specific user's email address or whatever they were using to log in, then I think that there would be a pause before they logged in. I saw a few other hands pop up. I think maybe that's what everyone else was thinking of too. Zach, did you have another thing to add? Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious because I didn't know if it was something where it has to be stored in the database before you can actually do a login. And it's largely based out of my frustration with, I just made an account, now I have to retype this stuff in again. I wasn't sure if there was an actual reason behind that.
Yeah, I think in that case it would be stored, but I think that there would be a status on that user of whether or not it was verified or not, because there still needs to be a way to check against the account that was created in order to verify that that user has like clicked that link, and that verification might also come through the link itself. But that's a great question. I like that we're thinking of that stuff. Cool. I think the other thing that I'll add here, just with what I'd expect is, and I think we've kind of said it, like some type of username and password to be able to create an account. Sometimes there's a password confirmation. Hopefully there is, but some type of username password to be able to create an account. Any questions just on these two brainstorming questions at the moment? Lee?
Is there a reason why some websites will have you type in your password twice, whereas some will just have you type it in once? Is that just kind of like developer decision there, or is there a different layer of security when you're typing it in to like confirm that it is what you say it is?
Yeah, I think it's more so to help the user out in that case of like, if there was a typo the first time, like some people think that they wrote the correct password that they're trying to write, but if they wrote it a second time correctly, it's kind of helping to resolve user error ahead of time. Yeah, which I think it's a great field to add to your logging in and registering, not logging in. Lawrence.
Sorry, with just adding on to that question from Lee, when you're creating an account, I was looking at bcrypt and it looks like you're sending an unsecured password. Is there a way to secure it on the browser side, or is it just?
It will, unless you're sending it over like secure transfer, but I it will be sent as plain text when you are creating that user, when you're registering. But as soon as it gets to your controller, in our case, we want to, before this kind of encryption that we're going to do with the password, it's going to happen at the model level. Like we'll tell it at the model to like, hey, before you create this object, make sure you encrypt this string, this like basic string that we have access to. So the encryption happens as soon as it gets to our application. But as far as the transfer goes, it's plain text, plain string until it gets there. All right, let's go ahead. Let's take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at 27, and then we'll diagram some things out. See you at 27. All right, this link, I'm going to use a Miro board just to whiteboard this out. The link for the Miro board, if you wanted to pull it up on your own, or even if you wanted to come back to it at another time, take a screenshot or whatever after class, it's in the slides, so you'll have access to this. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. And yeah, I want to kind of talk through both registering and logging in, mostly registering at this moment. But let's see. Authentication. All right. Cool. So let's imagine we have an app right now, and let's imagine our registration form. So we go to some page, it asks us to register. And as we mentioned already, we talked about to register, we need some type of username. Let's just say it's an email in this case. And then some type of password. Again, you could do a password confirmation. I think for the sake of just diagramming this out, I'm just going to do a password in here. And yeah, okay. I'm trying to think how I want to do this. Okay, register, we have an email, we have a password, and the goal of registering is to create a new user within our application. So eventually we want to, in our database, in our application, we want to have some type of table in here for users that is going to have an ID, it's going to store our email, and it's going to store our password, so that we can later check against this table to ensure that someone is who they say they are. So kind of like what we know up until now, if we're creating a new object, creating a new entry into our database, which verb are we going to use? Flush. Yeah, Taya.
Post?
Yes, cool, I like it. So let's say we have email, password. We go ahead, let's just put like a little submit button down here. Submit, create. What is this? Thanks. And as soon as we hit this button, submit, then we're going to take this email and we're going to take this password and we are going to make some request, like a post to /users to create users. So then in here, we're going to have a, let's just say here, I put in meg@example.com, x.com, and password is I love dogs. Okay, so we're creating this user. Let's say in here, we're going to go ahead and say meg@example.com gets stored in here. And then our password is I love dogs. Just stored as plain old text. This might not feel good to a lot of people. Why does, if you're one of those people that this does not feel great for, why does this not feel great to you? Rich.
Because it's visible, like anyone can read it.
Anyone can read it. If someone were to get access to our database, they could see our users table. They could see all of the emails of our users, which like maybe isn't the worst thing. Like we could also secure those. But I think that the biggest thing is we have the credentials stored in plain text so that if anyone were to access our database, they could get the login information for any of our users of this application. Lawrence?
I was just gonna say also people tend to use reuse passwords. So if they do get that password, they've got it possibly to a lot of that user's information.
Yeah, totally. That's huge as well. Rich, did you have something else?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, you're good. I saw your hand lower and then raise again, so that's why I thought that. Cool. Yeah, okay, so doesn't feel great to some people, doesn't feel great to me. Reason behind that, again, is because we don't want to store our passwords in plain text. Too much of a security risk. So I'm going to undo this, go back to pressing the submit button. Nope, wrong. Eraser. Cool. Okay, so I love dogs. So instead, this is kind of where we introduce this idea of having some sort of hashing algorithm to be able to encrypt the password before we store it into our database. So I'm going to put in the middle of this, like between what our user sees, and this is actually kind of, I think I mentioned already, at the model level, before we store a user, we're going to run our password through bcrypt, the bcrypt gem in our case, and that bcrypt gem is what is responsible for hashing that password and storing it into our database. So I'm going to draw out something here. Okay, cool. Let's say that this is bcrypt. Bcrypt, again, is a gem that we'll install. And what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of, as we hit submit, the email is still going to get sent with that post request, as well as the password. It's still going to get sent with the post request. But before we create it, we're going to send the password to get encrypted. So it's going to kind of like take a little turn here. It's going to meet back up with our email eventually with our post request. But we're going to send it through our bcrypt gem to get it encrypted. So as it goes through bcrypt, it's going to come out with some sort of like, what was this before? I love dogs. It's going to come out with some hexadecimal, really long. I think it's like, it's not really long. I think it's like 32 characters or something like that. Something interesting with this is no matter how long you create your password to be, like I love dogs, password, 2 letters, whatever it is, it's still going to get encrypted with the same length string. This is still a string that's going to come out of bcrypt. It really what happened here is like it took this string of I love dogs, and there's a bunch of, oops, just a bunch of math going on here. And the math is so complex that it actually is only one way. We can't undo it. Should not be able to undo it is the idea there. Bcrypt uses a hashing algorithm. SHA-256, I think it is. This is not like important to know, but there are different algorithms that that these gems are using. For bcrypt, for example, it's using SHA-256. You might also have heard of MD5 as another one. SHA-256 is, I would say, preferred over MD5. Although we want our applications to be quick, we want to be careful not to sacrifice our security when it comes to like getting something to be fast. So for example, SHA-256 actually takes a little bit longer to encrypt than MD5. And since it takes a little bit longer, it's more desirable to use something with SHA-256 because that tells me that it's a more intricate algorithm. It's a little bit harder to break then. And since this is only one way, it can't be decrypted going the other way. I can't put something in this side and have it decrypted. It only knows how to encrypt. Joe.
Yeah, does bcrypt use salting well?
It doesn't. If you were to use bcrypt and someone else uses bcrypt, the hashing algorithm that you have is going to be the same since it's all SHA-256. You in your application, you could add your own salt on your like application side. And what is the reason why you would do that? And I don't know if that might be a new term for some people, but it's kind of adding another layer of encryption that you know as a developer and no one else knows. So since this is a gem, and that's like pretty common to do, since this is a gem that is often used, it has the same hashing algorithm that other people are going to use if they use the bcrypt gem. It's common to, after it goes through bcrypt, go ahead and run it through a new salt or just like a new encryption that you know how to do. And then you store that into your database. So it's like another layer of encryption that you can add.
Gotcha. Thanks, I got one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So when the password's being encrypted and then the user's registered, when they log in again, so obviously they have to compare the password digest with the password that's being used for login. There's no like unencryption that goes on, right? Like it's just re-encrypted the new login password and then compared, right?
Yeah, I like that question. Let's talk about that. I'm going to talk through that, and then everyone that has their hands up, keep your hands up when we get to you. So originally this param, we talked about like when we're sending off this request, this post request here, it comes through as just plain text and plain string, whatever the user put in. And it's coming in with this, whatever we said this field was called, I'm assuming we're going to call it something like password. So whatever that field was called, that's the parameter that's coming in. As soon as, and bcrypt actually is looking for a parameter called password. Bcrypt will also look for a parameter called password confirmation. You can take a look at the bcrypt docs because there are built-in methods with bcrypt that you can just, I think it's even, and I think we'll use it today, just the like .authenticate or confirmation that will check to make sure that password and password confirmation do actually match. So there are some built-in methods. Bcrypt is pretty cool that it does look for something called password. It will also look for something called password confirmation if you had passed it in, but you don't need to pass in password confirmation in order for this to work. So bcrypt's going to see, hey, I just got, when I'm like trying to create a user, I see right now that I have this password parameter that's coming in. So let me go ahead and grab that value associated with password and go ahead and put it through my hash algorithm. And when it comes out, it's no longer going to be associated with this key of password. Now it's going to be associated with this key of password. Gosh, let me actually rewrite this. First time this mod using this. It's always not great. Password underscore digest. And this is unique to bcrypt. Like it won't always be called password digest depending on what you use for your encryption. This right here, like bcrypt, what it's creating is, we have like different words for this. We could call it a hash, what comes out of this. We could also call it a digest, which is what bcrypt is using. We could also call it digital fingerprint. A lot of different names for this. But in bcrypt's case, we call it a digest. So now it's going to store whatever it got encrypted to as password digest. And now instead of storing password in your database, it's going to store password underscore digest. So when this post comes through, now it's storing this x120y ... as well as this email of meg@example.com. And now kind of jumping back, Joe, to your question of when a user logs in. So let's say, again, we have a login here. We're also going to have that email, and we're also going to have that password field to log in. Now, let's say we put in I love dogs. I put in all of my, sorry, this is messy, but I'd put in meg@x.com, my password of I love dogs. And same thing, this time I'm going to be, we'll talk more about this later, but we'll be creating a session where we're just like logging in to make sure that this person that's putting in these credentials is actually a user that I have in my database. What it's going to do then is it's going to take this I love dogs, again, with that password field. It's called password, so bcrypt's going to see it, and it's going to run it through the encryption algorithm again, and it's going to come out exactly the same as it was the very first time we pushed that I love dogs through the encryption algorithm. So now it's going to take a look at meg@x.com and this password digest that came through of x120y, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to look and see, is there a user that has those credentials in my database? Joe, does that, yeah, does that bring up any other questions for you?
Not right now. Like, it makes sense, because if it randomized it at all, then how would it match it up properly? So I get it. Exactly. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I was going to get there eventually, but I always love when people ask questions that lead me to the next part. So thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and jump to Lee. Question.
Thank you. I've got two. So my first one is bcrypt is this gem, but it's not like bcrypt is the whole thing of the password algorithms. Bcrypt is just like, it's a gem in the way that it's like a language. There are different password algorithms that aren't associated with bcrypt. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, there are different algorithms, different gems that you could use. I won't spend much time looking through this with you all today, but I would definitely encourage you all to take a look at the bcrypt docs.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find it. It's also in the lesson plan somewhere. But yeah, it is a gem. It comes with its own methods as well, which we'll see in the code along today.
Okay, cool. I'll dig into that a little bit. Thank you. And then my next question, again, it's a little silly, but when we're creating like our users table, do we need to name that column password underscore digest specifically? Or is that just like what we call it after it's gone through bcrypt? So like we
go ahead.
Nope, sorry. I think you were good. Yeah, I think you understood the question. I was just gonna just gonna beat it with a stick. So.
Cool, appreciate it. Yes. So the reason why I also like wanted to diagram this out is because the tutorial just has you doing like a Rails G migration, create users, email string, password digest string. And then in my head, like if I'm going through the tutorial for the very first time, I'm like, where the heck did this password underscore digest come from? But it's us already knowing that we're going to utilize the bcrypt gem, which is going to spit out originally a password key that came in into a password digest key that's going to get stored. So since I know that I'm going to use bcrypt and I know that it spits out the key of password digest, that's why I'm going to, when I'm creating the users table, say password digest string. And you all will see that, but that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Do you have any others?
So many more, but like there's other people, so I'll just like, keep them tight. Thanks.
You're good. We're doing fine on time. I expected a bunch of questions. Lawrence. Oh, you're muted.
I was holding on the space button, but on something random. Since this does the same encryption for each time. Is it good practice to limit login attempts then? And are we going to go over that?
Yeah, we're not going to go over it today, but I would say yes, that is good practice, and you probably have experienced that yourself, which is why you're asking it. Of like, okay, you've tried this 5 times. I'm getting a little close to worrying that this is some sort of brute force attack, where I'm just trying a bunch of different passwords that could possibly be working for that user. So yes, I would say a counter would be something that you could take a look into, and I would almost think that would be something on like the front end side that we would track, just like how many times something was clicked or how many times we got an error with it. So we won't go over that today, but I think if you would like to take a look into that, that would be great. Thank you. Mark.
Hi. This is hopefully a quick question, but is there a point where like between someone entering the password to like the post, like someone can hack or something, or retrieve that password, or is that just like impossible because it's like a timing thing?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I feel like I'm not a hacker. So I feel like there's definitely a way, probably, that I don't want to say definitely a way. I feel like it's very close to hard to do. And I'm wondering if anyone else has any thoughts on that too, or if anyone else has kind of, I know we have some computer science backgrounds in here too, if anyone has any experience with that when it comes to just the request response cycle and at what point that would be, that could be intercepted. I think with this, since it's coming through a form, it's not coming through it's coming through the body, which is more secure than as if it were to come through the header, which is why I feel like it's pretty safe.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Alex?
To continue on with maybe this is a silly question, is the reason why when you need to reset your password or you need like a hint or something, it just like only gives you the option to completely change it and doesn't just like tell you what it is? Does that have something to do with the fact that the encryption can only go one way? Like it can't tell you what your password is maybe, but it can let you set it, right?
As the developer, like looking at our database, we also should not know what that user's password is. So since it is one way, we can't even grab this string and like put it back through, because then this encrypted string is going to get re-encrypted. If you ever were to experience an application, and maybe this is the case, like I feel like I have many years ago experienced something where it was like, forgot my password, and then I checked my email and it was like, here's your password, don't you remember, like this is what you put in. Like that is not a secure database, because it was just stored in plain text. They could grab it, they could send it to you and say, here's your password. So you should always, like if you forgot your password, it should go through resetting it, because the application, if it is secure and well done, then it should not know what that password was.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, on this topic, often it'll tell me when I try to enter a new password, oh, I'm sorry, you used to use that password like in the past sometime or other. Mm-hmm. And you can't use that password because it's the same as your old password. Or one of your old passwords. And so I end up with, 20 different passwords that are all slightly different, and I can never remember any of them, which is annoying. But I guess my main question is, how is it able to tell that the password that you're trying to you're trying to set it as when you reset your password, is the same as the old one? Mm-hmm. If it can't tell you what the old one was, or is that another indication that the database is actually unsecure?
I think I like that question. I think similarly to how this is done, and we're able to take a look at the encrypted password and see that it matches the one that we have stored for that user, it would be done similarly. I think of what you're saying, Andrew, as more of a like, in that case, it sounds like in the database, we have a one-to-many going on of like, there is a current password for that user, but that user has had many passwords in the past. And so if they were to put in, like if I had I love cats here, and that was an old password, and I put in I love cats, and it came out into an encrypted string, I could take a look at the passwords that I used to have, the passwords that were associated with users, to see if that encrypted string that came from I love cats was one of my old passwords. And I think reason behind, like, a lot of applications have been doing that, and it always frustrates me too, because I'm like, let me just use this password that I know I use on a lot of things. But I think a lot of reasons for that is for the user's own security. Like, okay, that was something that you had changed. It's possible that like someone else has access to that now. So we're like encouraging you to actually make a new password. Okay, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, a little longer, maybe let's say 7. Come back at 57, and then I'm gonna get you all started on the tutorial. 57, see you then.
Oh, I was about to ask Lee a question, and then she goes and takes her earphones out.
I'm still here. What's up?
Oh,
or just
no,
about Lee?
Well, I just need Lee to ask her questions, because now I have questions about what her questions are.
I just have a lot of them, but I think part of them will be answered by reading the docs. Don't worry, Lawrence. I'll fill you in on all my questions, though.
All right. I'm subscribed to your newsletter.
Okay, 57. All right, I just dropped this lesson plan in the chat if you don't have it open, or just quick access to it. And what I want us to do is, I sent already, and this is also on the slides, this repo for practice. Once I let y'all go ahead and clone this down. I'm going to be adding to this. So I see a few people forked it, but I'm going to be adding to this throughout a few lessons this week, tomorrow's lesson. And I think Brian will also add to it a little bit, kind of like, I think y'all did that similarly in Mod 2, just like adding onto the same repo. So I suggest cloning it so that you can always pull down, or like maybe have 2 copies, your own, and then one that you can clone to kind of pull down these branches. If this main copy is always going to look like this, but after today, I'll push up a branch for authentication. So yeah, get this clone down, and I'm going to have y'all start at this registering user. So I ran through this once again this morning just to make sure that I had everything in here that y'all could like truly just go through step for step and not miss anything. So I'm pretty positive that this is all good to go. If you run into anything, just like Slack me. Some of you are not going to be on the Zoom call, because I'm going to let you all do it on your own if you want. Some of you might be in breakout rooms, so either Slack me if you're not on the call, or raise your hand and I can jump in too. But yeah, so what this is going to be is just working through, I want y'all to work through registering a user. We'll do logging in together. Test is already written out for you. I would encourage you to type this out, just so you know what you're actually writing. And make sure you're reading through each section of this tutorial, not just like copy and pasting the code snippets that are here. Yes, so registering as a user, you'll go to root path, register as a user, and be able to insert a username and password. For this example, we're not doing a password confirmation. Again, y'all can take a look at the bcrypt docs to take a look at how you could use a password confirmation. Click on create user. The user should get created, and then we should get, this doesn't have an expected path. I guess it's just gonna go to the root path again. Do I have that here? Yeah, I guess we're just gonna have this go to the root path. Gosh, I thought I checked over everything. But this, once you create the user, you should see a message that comes through that just says welcome, whatever their username is. So I'm gonna have y'all go through this tutorial. Again, walks through everything. You're gonna take some time, because eventually when you create a user, you're gonna have to take a little break and write your tests for a user table. Shoulda matchers are already, I just put that in last class. So shoulda matchers already in there. You don't need to worry about this part. If you want to pause to take a look more at the bcrypt docs, you're welcome to, but I think y'all can come back to that. We kind of talked through mainly what bcrypt is. And I want you to go all the way up until logging in. So you can stop there at logging in. I saw a hand raise and then it was down. Alex, is that you?
Yeah, that was me. I was just making sure that it's Congress Tracker that we're doing, right?
Yes. Did I put two different links somewhere?
No. I just wanted to make sure. And
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and then I saw in the chat, Regina says, "Are we forking or are we cloning down the Turing one?" So
it's up to you. I'm going to keep pushing up branches throughout the next 2 weeks when we do lessons. So if you ever wanted to pull down my branches, you'd want to have my copy, so you would clone it. But you're welcome to fork it so you have your own. You could do both. Taya?
Hi. Are we coming back?
Yes.
Cool. What time?
Yeah. We're going to come back at 10:45. So at 10:45, be ready to like hit the ground running. So if you need to take a 5-minute break before that, that's fine. And if you don't finish it all at this time, that's okay. We're gonna go through it as soon as you come back. I'm not gonna code it out in front of y'all, but I'll have it at least to display and kind of talk through at 10:45. And then we'll get into the logging in. Kevin?
Hi, yeah, just a quick observation. You were screen sharing the Congress Tracker 2013, and the repo link was for 2011. So we should go with the more updated 2013.
Yeah, where did you find this one?
I'm sorry. I was going from the Google Calendar was to 21. Was the older
thank you.
one.
I did not update that. That's my bad. I'll go ahead and drop this in here in your chat as well. Thanks, Kevin. Mark?
I was wondering about the gems. Like, do we just do the bcrypt gem? Do we do any other gems that we need to put in?
That's the only one you'll need for this class. Bcrypt actually is so common with Rails that it ships with it. You'll just have to uncomment it out. If you look at your gem file, bcrypt's already in there, it's just commented. So if you just uncomment it out and then bundle it, you should be good to go. And it'll talk through that in the tutorial as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, let me stop this. Cool. I'll go ahead again. 10:45. We're going to jump back on this call. If you would like to be paired up with someone or work with somebody on this, do whatever you want to do. Driver, navigator, whatever. Stay on this call. Otherwise, you're welcome to hop off and do this on your own. Slack me if you have any questions. See ya, some of you.
Hey, man.
The changed version, is that going to be a branch or just the main?
Branch, just called authentication. Yeah, if you take a look at the repo on GitHub, you can see it. Cool. Thanks for saying that, Lauren. So I know not everyone was able to get through all of this. I will say, like, if you are someone that likes to code along and you would like the code that I'm going to build off of now, I did push up. I went through the tutorial and did all of that on the repo that you all already cloned. And I went ahead and I pushed up a branch called authentication. So if you want to pull that down to take a look at locally on your computer, you're welcome to see kind of like where I'm starting from right now. To start, I would like to go through just that kind of like quickly just go through what I was hoping for y'all to get through during this time. Let me go ahead and share this screen, and I want to look at, let's start with the test. And as we go through this, raise your hand again if y'all have any questions. And let me make this a little bigger. Too big. Is this okay? Do y'all need it any bigger than this? Or would you like it any bigger? Anyone? Okay. Silence tells me it's fine.
Sorry, I wasn't able to get to it. I would love it just a touch bigger if that's
a little bigger. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for speaking up. Okay, cool. So this is what we started with, user registration form. I'll apologize again. I'm sorry that I missed the path for the register. And I imagine that some people got hung up on that, and that's okay. We'll talk through it. So it creates a new user. We're visiting the root path. And then let's walk through. The end goal here is to be able to fill in username and password, which we had to update this later. Username and password. And then after creating that user, getting a flash message that says welcome, whoever that user is. All right, so running through this, let's get rid of all this for now. Cool, and taking a look at routes. So first thing we did was created this route for welcome index, which meant that we needed to create a welcome controller with an index method that eventually routed to this index view. On the index view, this is where I messed up and did not get this updated in lesson plan. It originally in lesson plan had it going to the new user path. I just here wrote /register in the routes, since I put this route as just a hand rolled /register to users new. Since I put it like this, if I take a look at rake routes, it would show me that this path helper is register, so register path. So in my index, I just have it going to /register. I could also have said register _ path. Aaliyah?
I'm just curious why we would change it to register and like create that non-RESTful route if we could use like new user path instead.
Totally. And did you before were you thinking of doing like a user /new? User /new?
Yeah, I just did like a resources user, and so like I actually ended up not changing it to the register path because I wasn't really sure why we would want to make that change.
Yeah, that is totally fine and very valid. I changed it to /register. You could have also like made this look different for the user. In my opinion, or just like from my experience with applications, when I look at the browser, when I look at the path that I'm on when I'm registering, I don't usually see it say /user /new. It looks more kind of like semantic to what I'm actually doing. I'm registering. So that's why I chose to hand roll it here. You could have also used resources and overwritten the path. That would have been fine too, but that's kind of why I made this update, which ended up having us go down a rabbit hole. just because I wanted it to look a little bit better for the user.
Got it. Thank you. So it's more just like the common convention for the user experience would be that you adjust it to be not technically RESTful.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's not that it's not RESTful. This is still going to one action for a particular resource. We're just having the path say something a little bit different. But I would still consider it to be kind of a RESTful route. I would consider it to not be RESTful if I was sending it to an action that wasn't like new, create, update, or something that was like a common action. Or if I was sending it to the same action as another route. But I think I would still consider this to be pretty RESTful. Alex?
Yeah, so I originally had, sorry, that was my dog. Instead of it saying \register, I had register path in the index view, and it was giving me the same error over and over that said like undefined local variable for register path, and then I switched it. It was fine. Why?
I think that this is, I'm not too sure on that. I'd have to look it up a little bit. Maybe someone else has the answer to this, but I think that root is just like a keyword in Rails that allows us to set the root. I don't know that we can do that with other paths, but Susie, did you have an answer to that?
Oh, no, I don't have an answer to that. I have my own
Yeah.
question.
You're good. Alex, I think that's my best guess at that for this moment, but I also tried doing the same thing. And I think it's looking at it as like a variable since it doesn't know what that method is. But in this case, root is kind of a method for Rails.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah, Susie?
Yeah, I was just curious if you could show us the syntax for writing the route as a resource with register instead.
Yeah, let's actually, can we do, I'd have to play around with it a little bit, but I definitely can help you all find that. Can you actually in the thread in the code help channel, can you paste that question and then I can go ahead and paste a code snippet later.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. Okay, cool. So we have that index.html. I have this link to register as a user. So then we go to /register, again, taking a look at the routes again. That /register goes to users new. So in that users controller, in the new action, we're kind of getting set up here to create a new user. So we're creating like an empty user object. There's nothing in it, just an empty user object to be able to use with our form with. Yeah, form with. User, oh, that was in the new. So in the new view, we're using form with, we're binding it to this model. And we have the fields for username, the fields for password, and then we have the button for create user. Since it's attached to this user empty object, Rails is able to make a few predictions for us as to where this is going to get sent. So since it's an empty user object, there's nothing in it, it's going to make the prediction that it's getting sent using a post to create this object, or to create a user object. And so it's going to make a post to /users, since it's our users model, and it's going to make that prediction that it's, or here we're telling it to go to the create action. So post to users, if we take a look at the users controller, we have this create action here. I'm going to pause. I feel like I just sped through that quick. Again, our routes, or sorry, our form went ahead and made that prediction for us that we're going to make a post to user, since that @user, what's stored in that @user instance variable is an empty user object. It's going to look to post to /users and then pass along the information that we send it in the form. Taya?
Can you just reiterate the empty user and what's happening with that?
Totally, thank you.
That's a terrible question.
No, I understood where you're going with it.
Okay.
Let's go and pull this up here. Okay, cool. So in the case with form with, we're able to bind it to a model in order for our form to make some predictions for us as to where, as soon as we hit that submit button, where it's going to get sent. So in order, or what FormWith does is it's going to look at what it's associated, what it's attached to, if you assign a model to it. And in this case, user.new is not necessarily, this isn't something that is stored in our database. It's just an empty user. Let's take a look at this. I don't think I have a shortcut for this right now. Let's run our tests. Features, what am I on? Register. Okay, so if we take a look at user here, it is a user object, like it's a from the user class, and we can see that everything in it though is nil. And so what FormWith does is it'll see, okay, this is for a user object, but it doesn't look like it's something that is stored in my database. I can tell because the ID is nil. And so FormWith is going to make the prediction as soon as it comes through with that ID of nil that, oh, okay, I must be trying to create a user object. So in order for FormWith to work with those predictions, we need to bind it to a model so it knows where to send that request to. Lawrence?
I think this is a problem I run into regularly and I can't figure out completely why, but when I just try and run RSpec with what we've sent, it can't find the username field on the fill in. And I'm just in this branch.
Yeah, and I think the tutorial, it does go over that when it can't find that, and when it can't find that username field. And the reason why that's happening is because since we're binding it to a model, it actually prepends all of these text fields with the model name. So it actually prepends it. If you were to open this up, you could see that, let's actually do a, what am I in? I'm gonna go to my spec. Hopefully, create user, where do I wanna put this? Let's just go. So as soon as we get to this /register path, we should see our fields. Just save and open page, get out of this, and let's run that again. So if we take a look at these fields, I'm going to inspect this page, take a look at these fields. It's saying it can't find this field username. And if we take a look at the ID of it, it actually is called now user_username because we bound it to a model. So that's kind of a tricky part with FormWith when you are creating a resource with that form.
If we
Kaya?
called, sorry.
Go ahead.
If we called in our, if we called @user, if we called it instead like @cat, would it be cat username or would it still be user username as the model is a user, even though we're calling it cat? Does that make sense?
Yep. It's huge. User. So it goes off of what the object is. Lee?
Just.
Oh, sorry. Actually, let me go ahead and jump back to Lawrence because I realized I also didn't follow up with you on that. Lawrence, did you have a follow-up on that?
That makes complete sense. I feel like I kind of fell into advanced routing and FormWith kind of haphazardly. Is there an area you would recommend going back to review this stuff? Because I've been just kind of not realizing things like this and having to find workarounds.
You know, and I also think that this has changed in the Mod 2 curriculum since I've been here. I think that originally we started working with form tags. Did you all work with form tags at all? Okay. And I would say it's okay to like start with using the form tag if that's what makes the most sense to you. And then you can come back and refactor it to something that's a little bit more, and not necessarily conventional, but I would say like a Rails practice is like Rails has so much that it does for you. So when there is a form helper that allows you, that will make predictions for you, it's more common that that form helper will be used. So form with actually took, what got deprecated recently? Form 4, I think, just got deprecated. So it probably also is that form with, there's not like as much maybe new out there for it, but I would just take a look at the form with docs and see what you can find there.
Okay, I read through those docs. I must have just missed it. Sorry. Thank you.
No, you're good. Lee?
So I actually have a question around this just to make sure that I understood you correctly. You were saying that when we use this form with in our view, because we're putting the model, it's going into like our actual model and saying, wow, I need to put user, because that's the name of our model, in front of all of those fields. So that's why in your test, you have fill in user underscore username and user underscore password, because that form with, okay, thanks. I just needed to talk through that to make sure that I was fully following that. That is pretty huge game changer. So thanks for that little golden nugget of information.
You're welcome. Sorry, I didn't know. I kind of thought that y'all had this in Matu, but if that is something that y'all haven't talked through, then that's like great feedback for me to know too. So I appreciate you saying that again. I even wonder, I'm wondering if I run this test and I take this out, I can show you. Even open page. So I took the @user off of it. So it's no longer bound to a model, and you can see it just came through as password. So it's just the fact that we bound it to a model. You can use form with without binding it to a model. It's just whenever you bind it to a model, it's going to append the model name in front of the field names.
What's the benefit of binding versus not binding?
Just to make predictions, just so that the form can make predictions for you on where to send it.
If we don't bind it, how would we need to change where it's sending it, or would we?
You'd have to just explicitly give it a path to tell it where to go.
Would that be part of the line 6?
It would be part of line 1, and I'll let you. Okay. I think I'm going to put like kind of a hold on this for now, just because I think this is, sometimes I'll like put a hold on things and I'm like, this is, yes, you need to know this because we're working in Rails, but sometimes when the questions get like very Rails specific and it's syntaxy, I might put it on you all to just take a look at that. But yeah, it would, Taya, go on line 1. And I don't need to ever.
I guess it would be in the view.
Yes,
that we tell it where to go. Cool.
Yeah, you got it. Cool. Yeah, please keep asking your questions, but just know that if I'm like, let's put that on you, it's probably just like a syntax thing. No harm in asking any questions though. Cool. All right, so let me just run my test to make sure I didn't mess up anything. Where did I put this? Save an open page. Cool. Oh yeah. Save it. Back to normal. Cool. Okay. Great. So we made this prediction to go ahead and make a post request to users new, or sorry, users. Let me pull up their out just so I can see it. So post to users, going to users, create. Then we get to this create action. This is kind of where the chunk of registering a user happens. So let's dissect this a little bit. And in here, we're saying we get our user params. This isn't entirely necessary to do it this way, but that's kind of how we had it in your lesson plan. So we're just grabbing the information that come in from the form. We have to require user first because it gets nested under user when the params come in, since we have it bound to a model again. And so we're allowing username and password to come in. Some of y'all may not have gotten to this part, but really what's happening here is we're saying, take that param that came in user params, and whatever the username was, downcase it. That way we can ensure like the uniqueness of the email, because it doesn't matter when you're sending an email to someone how you uppercase, lowercase it, it's still the same email address. So this is just a way to kind of sanitize information that's coming in before saving it. Taya?
Can you just reiterate why we're requiring user again?
Why we're requiring user again.
And not, sorry, can you reiterate again why we're requiring user in line 19?
Thanks. Let's go ahead and run it. So user params, I just had this here because we're calling it anyway. I could have put the pry underneath create. But if we take a look at the params that come in as soon as we hit submit and create that user, since we bound it to a model over here in our form, everything is initially nested under user. So we can't immediately say like params.permit username because it doesn't know where username is. It's not in the first, it's not like in the first set. You have to go into user first, and then you can go ahead and permit username. So we're saying require user, go into this key first, and then permit these specific values that came in through that key.
And that's, so if we did the thing where we didn't find it, that wouldn't be the case. Then it would just be params permit.
Correct. Yep. Params.
Cool. Sorry, the binding thing is new to me.
You're totally good. Yeah, that's right. Because we used something, we used form tag when you were here last.
Yeah, we used form tag.
Totally. Yeah, thanks for asking. Okay. Cool. Great. So again, sanitizing that username that came in. And now that it's sanitized, we're saying go ahead and create that user with this user information. So in here, if I put a pry there, take a look at what is user. These are just our params that came through that we're saying permit these two. Currently, it's still as test. As soon as I run this and say, actually, let me take this whole line. So as soon as we say new user equals user.create with, weird, I don't know what happened there, but it looks like it worked. So user.create with the user params that came in. If we take a look at new user, yes, cool. We can see all of this. We can see that the password digest, we didn't store that string of text. We actually stored this hash here. And the reason why we were able to do that was because at our user model, user.rb, we said here has secure password, which is a method that bcrypt uses in order to say like, okay, I have a password that came in. I'm going to go ahead and since this says has secure password, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I hash it before I save it to the database. So that's what this method is doing in your model. Has secure password. It's telling your user before you save it, before you save any information for creating a user object or a user entry into your database, make sure that you hash the password. Mark.
Just to confirm that hashed password digest doesn't change at all.
Correct. Yep, it's not going to change. Even if I passed in the string of test again into that bcrypt and had it output the hashed password, then it would still come out to this exact string.
Thank you.
So it's using the same algorithm. Yep, Taya.
So has secure password is essentially triggering bcrypt?
Correct.
Cool.
Using the bcrypt gem. Awesome. So that's what, when we created our user, we got our password digest stored. And then we went ahead and we made this flash message to say, welcome that new user's username, their email address. Questions? Taya.
All of them today. Just so there's less redundancy, would it make sense to, well, maybe not. Just because in the view, when we bind it to the user model, and then it pre-appends things with the username seems like super redundant. Yeah, and that was bothering me.
You could change that if you wanted to.
Cool.
You could have it say email if you wanted to, user email. Yeah. All right, y'all. Let's go ahead. I want to take a little break, give you a little break. Let's come back at let's do 28. And then I want to go through logging in with y'all. 28.
Zach, I see you finishing the next project already.
We don't have to start this already, okay?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
I just need the attention, okay? I wasn't loved enough.
All right, Lawrence, I'm here for you. Come here, I'll give you a hug.
Thank you. I'll leave you alone now.
All right, we are at 28. I'm recording. Let's go ahead and jump back into this. We have not too much longer left. We're not going to take any more breaks until we get to 12 o'clock and y'all are on lunch. So I will say, like, if you have questions that you feel like are maybe something that we can talk about a little later, feel free to put those in the code help chat. And otherwise, yeah, still feel free to bring them up. But I definitely want to make sure I can get through logging in with you all. And again, at the very end of class, whatever we don't get finished with the refactoring portion, I'll go ahead and push everything up so y'all at least have access to it. So what I went ahead and did already is I created a login spec. This is right from your right from the lesson plan. And the lesson plan does go through all of this as well. But I wanted y'all to have time working on the registering on your own. And then again, y'all are more than welcome to code along right now, or just take a look and come back to this video later. So taking a look at this login spec, just to see kind of what are we testing. So we've already created a user already exists. When we visit the root path, I want to click on a link instead of registering. I want to click on a link that says I already have an account. That should take me to the login path. And there I'm going to fill in my username and password, click login, and then I want to expect to still be on the root page. I want to see my welcome message, just like before with registering. And now though, and I think we kind of talked about this in the warm-up of like, what do you expect? What do you expect to happen when you log in onto other applications? And someone said something like, I think it was Ty, I think it was you, that said something like, okay, well, once I log in, I shouldn't really see like a login button anymore. I should see maybe a logout or something like that. Like the buttons change depending on if you are if you're a logged in user or not. So that's kind of what we're getting at here, saying I shouldn't any longer have this link of I already have an account because I've already logged in. And I shouldn't have this link of sign up to be a user because I'm already logged in. But I should have a link for logging out. And this is what I want to get through. If we have some extra time, we'll get to the logging out. But let's go ahead and run this test and just work through this. Let's see. Login spec. Okay, so we don't have this link. I already have an account. This is on my root path. We already have, we didn't error out on the root path. We already have this path. We already have this view, the index. So I'm going to go ahead and just create another link. And I want this link to say I already have an account. And just looking ahead, where do I want this to go? I want it to go to my login underscore path. So I'll use a path helper here. We have that in our test. So going to our login underscore path. We haven't created this yet. So that's kind of what I imagine is going to happen next, that I'm going to have to create a path to actually get to my login page. Run that test again. And we have undefined local variable or method login underscore path. You know what? Actually, I think that I didn't put this. This is the issue that y'all were having too, because I was using just hand rolled routes before. And I just have to paste something in. Zach, thanks for finding that fix for us. You know what, for right now, just for the sake of time, I'm just going to change this to /login. I'm having an issue with the path helpers at the moment, just for our tests. Yeah, I'm just going to change this in my test to be /login. And take a look at this again. Okay, there we go. So no route matches get /login. If I had that line that Zach told us all to put in, then it would have been fine if I just used the path helper, but I was having an issue with that in my Rails helper. So let's go to our routes. Let's go ahead and create this, what it's saying we're missing. We are missing a get to /login. And this isn't going to be RESTful. Again, a refactor later would be to make this RESTful. We'll talk more about that throughout other classes as well. But just for right now, I'm going to say login. Let's just let this go to the user's controller. And let's just have it go to login user. An action called login user that I'm making myself. So not RESTful. It's okay. I can refactor it later. So in my user's controller, I'm going to need to create this action login user. And I'm going to put a pry in here for right now. I need to make a shortcut. Okay. This is like, I don't know if anyone else does this, but anytime I create a new action, my go-to is just put a pry in and see what I have. So I don't exactly know what I'm going to do next maybe, but I want to see what I have access to. So currently when I log in my user, when I get to users login, I guess I don't really, now I'm thinking out loud, I don't necessarily need this to do anything for me at the moment. I mainly just need to display a page that will have the login form. So again, thinking out loud, I think I want to change the name of this. I think I want this to just say like login or like new login. new login. And then I'm going to have this render the login form, just like my users new rendered the registration form. So new login, let's go ahead and get out of here, run my test, see what's happening. Login user. Did I not save? Did not save. Okay, yeah. Can't find a test for, or sorry, can't find a view for new login. It's looking to render a view from this action. So I'm going to go ahead and create that view within my users folder for new login.html.erb. All right, and let's run our test. Okay. We have one failure. Fill in username. Unable to find field username that's not disabled. Let's take a look at our test. Login spec. So as soon as we get, it's totally fine up until here. We got to that /login. And now we're saying there should be fields on this page where we're able to enter a username and a password. And I don't have anything on that page right now. I have absolutely nothing. Okay, so I'm gonna run through this with a form with, and there may be some questions on the form with, since it seems like that's a little bit unfamiliar to us, which is totally fine. If we have some questions about it, I'll kind of like talk through most of it. But if y'all have further questions on the form with, let's put those in the chat. Let's kind of like put those on hold for now, and we can talk about like syntax of form with later as well. So I'm just going to put a title in here and just say, this is the login page. My error again that I'm getting is that I don't have a username field, or password field is what I would get next. So I'm going to create this form with, and this kind of comes back to your question of like, okay, we're not necessarily binding this to a model because we're not trying to create a new user. We're just going to try to use this information to find a user. So in this case, like, I'm not going to get any predictions from the form with of where this path should go. So I need to tell it where I should send this information to. And I want to send this to, let's just say, I guess we could, oh yeah, let me just use hand rolled. So I want my URL to be /login, but this time, and this right now, like I'm gonna make this a post because I'm creating a new session, which is how we're gonna refactor it later, like creating a new session for that user on that browser. So I'm gonna use a post for that reason, and we can talk a little more about that later. And then this local true is gonna go at the end of our form with. Okay.
Sorry, what is the local true?
You know, I have to go back, and I've always just put this on a form with when I'm not binding it. I have to go back and remember what exactly that is doing, but it's part of the syntax that I've always used for form with. Taya, do you want to put a question in the thread, and we can come back to that to figure out what exactly that's doing?
It does it in Ruby instead of Java.
What does that mean, Lawrence?
It'll try and make a JavaScript send if you don't do local true.
Interesting. Okay, I'm still curious to look into that a little bit more. So still put that in the code help channel, and I want to come back to that as well. Rich?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you don't put local true, it won't actually navigate to where you want to go. It just stay on that page. If you do local true, it will allow it to actually go to where you want it to go.
Interesting. Okay, that's why I always put it on, I guess.
But
okay,
why?
Cool. But why? Yes.
Yeah, I know, right? I think Lawrence
Keep that
was pretty
question
close.
up. That's it. Yeah. Oh. Wow, this just brought me. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Okay. I just got a call, and it took me to a FaceTime call on my computer, which is interesting. It's never happened. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll follow up with that. thanks for bringing that question up. And in here, we're going to go ahead and do a few fields. So we have f.label for email, or I guess we're using username. And we'll also do, oops, keep hitting the wrong one for password. But then we need the text fields. So f.text field for username. I don't need this then. And then same thing for password, but I'm going to put this as a password field. What this password field does is it just makes it so that it's the dots and someone can't just see the string that they're putting in. Nice little helper. Thank you, Rails. Password field. And then the last thing we need to put on here is something to submit this. So f.submit. And what did we want our submit to be? Let's take a look. Let's actually, I'm just going to leave this off and run my test and let that tell me. I might have an issue with this first. Unable to find quick button login. What did I just do? Let's take a look back at her. I think I missed a step. Login spec. Okay, yeah, cool. We're good. We just didn't put the button called login. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we want this button login. I guess that kind of tells me too, just looking at, that's interesting. I would have thought first looking at this, that it would have errored out on not having a post to /login, but I guess it doesn't even touch this until we hit the submit button. So that's something, just learned that. So we want this to be f.submit. My test told me that I'm looking for this button to be called log in. And then let's go to run it. There we go. Okay, cool. So no route matches this post /login. So I'm going to go ahead and create that route for post /login. This time, instead of going to a new login form, what I'm actually trying to do is like log in an actual user and compare their credentials with what I maybe have stored in the database. So instead of going to the new login route, again, this is still not RESTful. We can refactor later, but I want to post to /login and I want to go to users, let's say login_user. So actually log in this user. And now I'll go ahead and put this login_user. Oops. And put a pry in here. And run it. Okay, so we're hitting our pry. And let's see what we have access to. We've gotten here by submitting the form. If I take a look immediately just to see what do I have coming through with params. Cool, okay. You can see here, and kind of coming back to Taya, your question before of like having us come back and review why we had to permit user before we could go in to see username and password. Since we had it bound to that model before, that's why we had to go into user first. In the form that we just did for logging in, we didn't bind it to a model. We just had it as telling it which path to go to. So we don't have this under any other key. We can go ahead and take a look directly at username and password. And yeah, I guess, so we could say, we could like see if we have a username by this email. Let's do this. And I think I do want to follow along with, I think your lesson plan has it doing that. What's your lesson plan have to do for this? Yeah, that's what it has it doing here. What's our time at? 43, cool. So here for the login user, we could say something here like, really what we're trying to do is just like find that user, make sure that we have their information in the database. So we said like found user is equal to user.find by the username of whatever came in through the params. Username. And username. Let's take a look at this. Why does that keep doing that to me? There we go. So user.find by username, params username. I think that I'm megx.com. Did I create this user already in my test? Let's see. megatest.com. That's why. Shoot. Okay. Sorry, y'all. The login spec, there we go. I put megatest.com, but I'm actually logging in with megatx.com. Let me just redo this and then run our test again. That's what I meant it to say. Yes. And let me get out of here and run this one more time. Okay. So now taking a look at found user, we're saying like find this user by whatever param came in for username. Now we can see the user that we have stored in our database. So we can say, okay, yep, that user's in our database. I have record of that human on this application prior. They've already registered with me. I could then kind of like take, I think that in the login spec, it has it saying, we want to have this like flash message come up. And so, no, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just gonna, anytime I'm like, well, you know what, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I like want to put code down, but I'm like, I actually don't really know what the error is at this point. Let me comment this out and just see like, what am I getting at this point? I'm gonna stop, run my test. Okay, yeah, expect current path to equal root path. If I take a look at my login spec again, after I hit login, I wanted to go to the root path. So that's a redirect thing I gotta do. So in my users controller, in login user, just following my test, I'm just gonna say redirect to the root path. Let's try it again. Yeah, and now I'm getting this like, welcome, megatx.com. We can't find you. Expected to find that message come through, but wasn't on the page. And if I, let's see, did we use this up here? Yeah, flash success. Welcome, new user dot username. So this is kind of what I'm looking for. But again, in order to know like who that user is, I needed to look up the user. And let me just replace this with found user. And I'm going to bring this redirect down to the bottom. Okay, so we have the flash message in there. Let's go and run it. And what do we have? To not have, I already have an account. Expected not to find visible link. I already have an account. They found one match. I already have an account. So I think we're gonna have to do a little bit more work here to be able to decide like which link shows, what doesn't show. And this is where we get into that idea of, and I know we didn't have time today to kind of let you all go on some research on cookies and sessions. Again, you'll all have that class on cookies and sessions tomorrow morning. But just a quick, how do I want to do this? Let's do a quick overview really fast. Okay, so Rails is unique in that as soon as you, let's say, here's your little laptop, and as soon as you make a request to a Rails server, Rails is going to send back a response, and with that response is going to be a cookie that has a session on it. Can I find a cookie? Cool. No. Ah, you know what? Gosh, okay.
The tiny
the tiniest cookie. Like, come on, I'm just trying to be creative. Okay, here's our cookie. And I'm gonna say that there's a session on it. So I'm gonna put a little S on there. What a session is, we'll talk more about it tomorrow, but it's encrypted and we use a cookie to be able to pass it between our requests. We want to store our user information, like when we're sending back and forth, like the user that is logged in, we want to store it in something that's encrypted. Rails by default is going to put it, we want to put it into a session because Rails by default creates a session upon the very first connection to that application. So on this session, you, like the very first time you connect, that session is on those, it like keeps getting sent back and forth between request and response. As soon as we log in, let's say we went to, let's say the very first thing we did was we just made like a get to slash. Then it goes ahead and it creates the session cookie and it sends that back. And then let's say the next time we go and make a request to our server, we want to say, what are we trying to do right now? Let's think about your current project that you're working on. Let's say this is not like exactly what you're doing, but let's say I want to say get slash friends. Let's say I've already logged in. When I get to my application, since HTTP is stateless, even though you've already logged in once and your application has said, yep, I know who you are, you're in my database, the next request that you make is not going to know about you. So with every request that you make, you would need to send your username and password, your information that needs to authenticate you in order to get something that requires knowledge of who you are. So since Rails creates a cookie for us that has this session on it, what we will do is we're going to utilize this session. And as soon as someone logs in, we're going to, and as soon as we say like, yep, you're in our system, you've authenticated with us, you're good to go, we're going to say, okay, here's your user ID for kind of like quick lookup. Let's just say, I'm just going to put 1 here. User ID is 1. It's encrypted, even though we can read it right now. But it's going to take that user ID, very small, and it's going to put it on that session cookie. And now with every single one of your requests, now, and then it sends it back as soon as you log in. Now when we say like get slash friends, when we get to the database is like, or our application is like, who are you? Oh yeah, okay, let me take a look at this session. Your user ID 1, I must have already authenticated you. Let me go ahead and get your friends and send that back to display to the user. So session cookie, we're going to use to store our user ID so that with the next request that we make, we can identify who the user is that's logged in. Session comes built in with Rails. And so there is a keyword that we can just automatically use for logging in or for assigning a session. So what I want to do here is I'm going to say found user, we find our user. There's a lot in here that I like don't love, but we're going to have to fix. Here's where I'm just going to kind of like take a little jump and have y'all do a little research if you need to. Here, we're just finding the user by their username. That doesn't necessarily mean that they had the right credentials to get in. I don't know if anyone kind of made note of that as I was doing this. Something that comes with bcrypt, because we can't just say like, hey, does the password that got passed into login user, does that password match the password that we have stored in the database? We can't just check to see if those match before we say, yep, I know who you are, you're authenticated. We actually have to hash that password that comes in and check that hash password with what's stored in the database. So with bcrypt, we do have a method that comes with bcrypt called authenticate. So what I'm going to do in here is say, I'm going to find this user still, that's fine. Oops. Find the user. And I'm going to say, if user is authenticate, I'm going to explain this as soon as I write this down here. So with this method that comes with bcrypt, what it's doing is it's going to take the password param that came in, which was the string of I love dogs, and it's going to encrypt it for you and then check against this found users password digest in the database. So it's going to take a look at the string I love dogs, encrypt it with the hashing algorithm that bcrypt provides, and then check it against the found users password digest that's stored in the database. And this will either return true or false if it matches or not. So if it's authenticated, then we can go ahead and remember this user. So what comes with Rails is this keyword session, where I can put any key value pair that's going to get encrypted later. In our case, I want to say the session user ID is user.id. And then if they're logged in successfully, then I want to flash that message of welcome, whatever user was found. And then I want to go ahead and redirect them to the root path. Otherwise, I might want to do something like else. Let's like flash an error message. And I'm kind of going off of my test right now, but we're taking a step away from running my test, but I want to kind of talk through this like conditional here. Else I could flash an error message that says something like your username or password are incorrect. And then I could send them back to flash, or not flash. Then I could redirect them back to the login page. I don't know that this necessarily has fixed the error that we were getting before, but at least now that we are storing this user ID, found user ID, into our session, now we might be able to say like, okay, if there's a user ID in the session, then go ahead and display a certain link. Go ahead and display logout, or go ahead and display login if there isn't a user ID in the session. Let me run this. Sorry, y'all, I feel like I'm jumping all over. But again, this is all written out in the lesson plan as well. What I'll do at the end of this is I'll stay on for a little bit if any of y'all have questions after 12, and I'll keep it recorded so that anyone can come back and take a listen to any questions people have. So let's run this and kind of work through this again. So in the test for login spec, again, we got back to the root path. We're expecting to have this content welcome. That was fine. We had that flash message appear. Now that we're logged in, or now that we have that user ID stored into our session, we want to be able to utilize that to kind of make this conditional on what links should appear. If somebody's already logged in and remembered, then we don't want to have the links, I already have an account, or the link, sign up to be a user. We want to just have this link of log out. And so I want to be able to kind of use that session ID in some way. What I'm going to do is in my application.html.erb, oh, not application controller. Since all of our controllers inherit from this, I want to create a helper method for my views to kind of help distinguish between what links get shown. So in here, I'm going to create a helper method. Let's call it def current user. I'm going to write this out and then explain it to y'all. Oops. Okay. So what this allows us to do with this helper method, this keyword helper method, it allows us to like whatever methods that follow here, it allows these methods to be able to get called from our view, which is helpful, especially when we're trying to say like, based off of this certain condition, display this or display that. So in here, what we're saying is if a user, if in our session that Rails, that's from Rails created that, if within our session hash, there's a key called user ID, then go ahead and find that specific user with that user ID. And then save it into this at current, we could call this at current user. And in our view then for index, let me pull this to the other side. This is where we want that conditional to be of like, okay, if current user, so like if that came back with something, then I would want to display a link that had logout on it. And then I might take it to a logout path. I'm going to leave this off right now just so we can get the test to pass, because I think the test is just looking for a link called logout. Else, let's go ahead and display these two links for register as a user for I already have an account. I see a few hands popping up. Let me run this. Keep your hands up. Let me run this, get something green to appear, and then I would love to jump into some other questions. Okay, cool. So I think that this was a lot that I just like threw at y'all right now. I hate when at the beginning I'm like, you know what, we're good on time. Ask all your questions. And then at the very end, I'm like, you know what, we did run out of time. Sorry, y'all. But let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to keep recording this. I know other people have priorities at lunch or during this hour off. So if you need to drop for any reason, go ahead and do that. I'm going to keep the recording on. And if you have questions and you can't stay on for the remainder of however long we're going to be on, next few minutes or so, then put those in the code help channel and I can come back and ask those. But if you'd like to stay on, ask a few clarifying questions, please do so. Joe.
Yeah, so currently in terms of testing, like the session, so to speak, in terms of whether somebody's logged in or not, we're just doing it visually speaking based on the links. Is there a way to test the sessions, I guess, more directly?
Not to see what is in the session. You don't have access to that within your test. But so that's why I'm relying on what is actually on the page and what I would expect to be on the page in that case. What you can do though is, although we can't like see what is in the session from inside of your test, with the use of this current user, you could take a look at like, after going through that process, which user is the current user. But you can't necessarily take a look at the session hash from your test.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, we do rely more so on just like testing what we would want to appear on the page for that case. Jermaine?
Yeah, so this had more to do with the curriculum. I saw that there was the authentication. There were two classes, and then the second class, or the second follow along had the remembering users, but the first half of it uses the form tag format for the form. And I saw that the form tag was depreciated. So is it just more or less that the form with model format is something that we should just stick to because the form tag format is just kind of just outdated at this point?
Yeah, I didn't know that about form tag. I knew that about form with. I remember in mod 2, we used to teach form tag because it was a lot more explicit in what you all had to do. And then we eventually switched you all over to form 4. Form 4 then got deprecated. And so that's why we started teaching form with. But I have not heard that about form tag. So that's just mainly because I haven't used form tag in a while. But yeah, I would switch over then to using form with as the next one that I would use.
That's what we've been using. Well, at least that's what I remember learning last mod. So I think I'll stick with that.
Cool. Thanks. Okay. Cool. Those of you that are on, and also for the recording's sake, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also, once we hang up this call, I'm going to write out a test. I kind of already started to while you're all in breakout rooms before. I'm going to write out a test for logging out and then do some refactoring and get this pushed up so you all can take a look at this later as well. But if you all have other questions specifically, the main things that I wanted to get through in this class, although we went over a few minutes and this last part was kind of quick, was the registration, just like what is bcrypt, how do we use it, and then also how to log in. Logging out, we can think right now like we've used a session to be able to remember someone, and this current user is known as long as there is a session or there is a user ID in our session. And so pretty much logging out, really all you got to do is get rid of that user ID from your session, and then your user ID is, or your user is no longer remembered. So that's kind of the idea behind that. I'll go ahead and get that code in and pushed up, and I'll notify you all once that's all complete. Thanks for patience today, y'all. Appreciate it. Long class. See ya.